So the other day we looked at every Premier League club's biggest waste of money, and because we're not all negative, we're going to give these clubs some credit and pick out their greatest ever bargain. However, just as a disclaimer, we're not including free agents, so there'll be no James Milner or Zlatan Ibrahimovic this time out. Here is every Premier League club's best ever bargain. Arsenal, Patrick Vieira. If you were to sign a player like Patrick Vieira nowadays, he'd cost around £50 million. A box-to-box leader, Patrick Vieira was an absolute bargain when they brought him to England in 1996. The Frenchman cost the Gunners just £3.5 million from AC Milan and would go on to have an illustrious 9 years with the club. 3 Premier Leagues and 3 FA Cups, Patrick Vieira captained Arsenal during their invincible campaign and also had a legendary rivalry with the lovely Roy Keane. Sadly for Arsenal, Vieira left in 2005 and you could argue that they'd never really truly replaced him. Bournemouth, Steve Cook. The Cherries have kept a core of their players during their rise from League One to the Premier League, meaning there have been a fair few bargains along the way. We've decided to go with Steve Cook though, who cost Bournemouth a measly £150,000 from Brighton back in 2012, having previously been on loan at Dean Court. Brighton's loss was Bournemouth's gain, and Cook has been a mainstay in Eddie Howe's back four from League One all the way to the top flight. Despite going up the divisions, Cook has been unfazed, and the 27-year-old is now a highly competent top-tier defender, a long way from the days he spent in the conference. Brighton, Pascal Gross. The German playmaker was a revelation at the Amex last season as Brighton survived in the Premier League, and had to be considered as one of the signings of the season, especially when you consider the price tag. Gross cost Brighton just £3 million from Ingolstadt, where he made more than 100 appearances. Gross immediately adapted to Premier League life, scoring the club's first ever goal in the top flight, ending the season with 7 goals and 8 assists. Valued at just £3 million a year ago, you'll be looking to get him for £30 million now after that incredible debut season. Burnley, Charlie Austin. The Clarets spent just £1.5 million on Charlie Austin back in January 2011, after the forward had been banging in the goals in League One for Swindon. Austin had no issue stepping up to the Championship, scoring 16 goals in his first full season at Turf Moor. The next season would see Austin add another 25 Championship goals to his tally, which caught the eye of QPR, who took him to Loftus Road. Despite being there for just 2.5 years, Burnley pulled off a real bargain by signing Austin for so little, with the striker averaging a goal every other game during his time with the club. Cardiff, Peter Whittingham. Between January 2007 and the summer of 2017, Peter Whittingham was a key component in Wales. The midfielder would make 457 appearances for the club and scored 96 goals, including a 20-goal championship haul in 2010. Whittingham spent years as the model championship midfielder and even played during Cardiff's season in the Premier League that sadly ended in relegation. He's been a loyal servant of the Bluebirds through the good and the bad, and he only cost the club £350,000. Bargain. Chelsea, Cesar Azpilicueta. In a summer in which they signed Eden Hazard and Oscar, it was easy to see why there was no hype when Cesar Azpilicueta became a Chelsea player for just £7 million. The Spanish defender arrived from Marseille in a deal that didn't really get fans off their seats, but soon proved to be worth even more than the £7 million they paid. Affectionately known as Dave, Azpilicueta has proved to be one of the Premier League's strongest defenders, playing all across the back four under various different managers. No matter where he's been asked to play, Azpilicueta has been a master of defending, proving that he was an absolute steal at just £17 million. Crystal Palace, Wilfried Zaha. He might have started his career with Crystal Palace, but the Eagles' greatest ever bargain is probably still Wilfried Zaha. After shining early on in his career, the winger was snapped up by Manchester United for £15 million, but Old Trafford never really felt like home for Zaha. So after just 2 Premier League appearances for the Red Devils, Zaha was back at Selhurst Park on loan before making a permanent return for just £3 million. Since then, Zaha has become a talisman to Palace, and the Eagles seemingly just can't function without him, such is Zaha's importance to the club. Everton, Tim Cahill. The Toffees weren't always as wealthy as they are today. They used to have to skate around the bargain bin for players, and more often than not, they'd find some aces. Mikel Arteta was cheap from Real Sociedad, while they also found joy with cheaper young players such as John Stones. But we think their best bargain has to be Tim Cahill, who cost £1.5 million in 2004 from Millwall. The Aussie midfielder immediately repaid the small fee, ending his first season as the club's top scorer and being named the fans' player of the season. Cahill was always reliable in blue, scoring goals from midfield and punching corner flags, and after 8 years at Goodison Park, Cahill would leave for a similar fee, joining New York Red Bulls for £1 million. Fulham, Clint Dempsey. Signing players from America is always a risk, as you never quite know what you're going to get, as the USA are not notorious for producing great soccer players. But in Clint Dempsey, Fulham struck gold. The Cottagers paid New England Revolution £2 million for Dempsey in January 2007, which made him the most expensive American export at the time. Dempsey would spend 5.5 years at Craven Cottage, getting better as the years went by, going on to score 29 Premier League goals in his final 2 seasons, which saw him earn a move to Tottenham. Huddersfield Town, Jordan Rhodes. A signing from Huddersfield's League One days, the Terriers paid Ipswich just £350,000 for Jordan Rhodes, and my word did they get their money's worth. Rhodes was yet to really make his mark in the Football League before arriving in Yorkshire, but 3 full seasons with the club saw him score boatloads. Returns of 23, 22 and a mammoth 40 goals caught the eye of Blackburn Rovers, who would pay Huddersfield Town £8 million for the forward. He was an absolute bargain for Huddersfield, and they were able to get promoted to the Championship and earn some serious money thanks to Rhodes. Leicester City, Riyad Mahrez. This summer the Foxes sold Riyad Mahrez to Premier League champions Manchester City for £60 million. That's 150 times as much as Leicester paid for the Algerian. Mahrez was a bit of a nobody when he moved to England, arriving at the King Power for £400,000. Mahrez provided an extra spark for the Foxes as they were promoted to the Premier League, but it was their title-winning campaign where he really showed his quality. Mahrez scored 17 goals as the Foxes lifted the title, which led to numerous bids from Manchester City, ultimately culminating this summer with a £60 million move to the Etihad. Liverpool, Philippe Coutinho. Our most expensive bargain so far, Philippe Coutinho cost Liverpool just £8.5 million in January 2013. While that is a fair wedge of cash compared to some of the other bargains in this list, it's barely anything when you consider the calibre of the player. With no hefty price tag to weigh him down, Coutinho immediately looked settled in Liverpool red, going on to eventually become the club's main man. Considering this is a team that spent huge money on Stuart Downing, Andy Carroll, Lazar Markovic and Christian Benteke, getting a player like Coutinho for less than £10 million beggars belief. Manchester City, Joe Hart. The one and only goalkeeper on this list, Joe Hart's career has gone a bit awry in recent years, but that should not take away from what he did at Manchester City. His form saw him recognised alongside the world's elite, and Hart played an important role in winning Manchester City 2 Premier League titles. But before he was at the Etihad, Hart was plying his trade in League 2 with Shrewsbury. His performances caught the eye of City, who paid just £100,000 for Hart according to former City chairman John Wardle, a nominal fee for a club who spent £35 million on Edison last summer. Manchester United, Patrice EVRA. Despite a disastrous debut, Patrice EVRA would ultimately prove to be a bargain for Manchester United, only costing £5.5 million in 2006 from Monaco. The Frenchman spent 8.5 seasons as Manchester United's left back, making nearly 400 appearances and winning 10 major trophies. In total, EVRA played 379 games for the club, which means he cost £14,511 and 87 pence a game, which is pretty decent value when you compare it to Angel Di Maria, who cost almost £2 million a game. Newcastle United, Yohan CABAYE. To be fair, most Newcastle signings are a bargain nowadays when you consider the prices they pay, but their best bargain of all could well be Yohan CABAYE, who only cost £4.3 million. The Frenchman was brought in to replace Kevin Nolan, although CABAYE would do a totally different job. He took the Premier League live quickly, forming a sensational partnership with Cheick Tiote as Newcastle finished 5th in his first season. CABAYE was the orchestrator for the Magpies, but as always with Newcastle, they were a bigger club round the corner and CABAYE was sold to PSG for £19 million. Southampton, Morgan Schneiderlin. Another French midfielder and a signing from 10 years ago, Morgan Schneiderlin is anything but a bargain nowadays, but at Southampton he cost buttons, arriving for £1.2 million from Strasbourg when he was just 18 years old. The Frenchman was in the middle of the park at Southampton yo-yoed between the Championship and League One before reaching the Premier League in 2012. His form in the top flight saw Manchester United fork out £25 million for him, but it didn't work out at Old Trafford, and he's now at Everton after a £20 million move, where it also isn't working out. Tottenham, Christian Eriksen. Our most expensive bargain, Christian Eriksen cost Tottenham £11 million from Ajax 5 years ago. While this is still a decent amount of money, consider how good Christian Eriksen was when he arrived at White Hart Lane. The Dane was highly rated for his performances in Holland, and on top of that, Spurs had a lot of money to play with, having received a world record fee for Gareth Bale from Real Madrid. That normally means teams will charge you more for players, but Spurs were able to pull a rabbit out of the hat with Christian Eriksen, who would surely now command at least 10 times what Spurs paid for the playmaker back in 2013. Watford Troy Deeney. Nowadays, Troy Deeney is Mr. Watford, donning the captain's armband and leading by example, but as well as being a leader, he was also an absolute bargain after arriving from Walsall in 2010. The Hornets paid an initial 250 grand for Troy Deeney, which actually looked like a waste of money when he was sentenced to 10 months in prison in the summer of 2012. But the forward was released after 3 months, and since then, Deeney has been a man possessed, dragging the club to the Premier League and ensuring they stay there. There's been a lot of change at Watford in recent years, but Troy Deeney remains the one constant. West Ham Paolo Di Canio. The Hammers paid just £1.5 million for the Italian in 1999, but even that was considered a massive risk by manager Harry Redknapp, who signed a player that hadn't played since a ban for pushing a referee. But Di Canio was worth the risk, with his football doing all the talking. He would score one of the greatest goals the Premier League has ever seen, and win Hammer of the Year, as well as picking up FIFA's Fair Player award. Not for pushing the referee over, obviously. Di Canio was excellent for West Ham, but was released in 2003 following the club's relegation. And finally, Wolves' JOAO MOUTINHO. For just £5 million, Wolves were able to sign Euro 2016 winner JOAO MOUTINHO. Despite being 32 years old, this was an absolute steal by Wolves. Another member of their Portuguese contingent, Moutinho has quickly adapted to the Premier League and looks like the perfect partner for the youthful Ruben Neves in the middle of the park. Wolves might have a lot of money at their disposal nowadays, but that doesn't mean they can't pick out a bargain, which is exactly what they've done with JOAO MOUTINHO. So that's every Premier League club's best ever bargain. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching and don't forget to like, share and subscribe.